Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our 6 gigahertz IMT Opportunity for Society webinar, where we will be looking at the 6 gigahertz band of spectrum and the opportunity to use it to leverage 5G and its evolution. I am Paul Norkus. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I will be your host today. I'm a marketing manager with Nokia, and we've got an amazing group of industry and vendors across the world who are here basically to tell the story around the 6 gigahertz opportunity. Note that this is the second in a series of webinars being brought by both industry leaders and regulators in the mobile 5G spectrum space, where we'll be focusing a bit on the Latin America region. We have additional webinars coming up, which we'll showcase at the end, as well as a previous webinar, which we'll link to as well at the end of the webinar. Before we start, I'd like to basically provide a little bit of housekeeping here. And basically, we want you to, if you have any technical issues, or if you have a question that you would like to submit, please use the same question and answer icon, which you can see here on this screen. So this way you would be able to submit anything we have for the questions at the end. If you cannot find the Q&A window after selecting the icon, please maximize it in your browser, in your window, and you should be able to find it. All right. So the deployment of 5G will bring large benefits to mobile service providers and users over the coming years. So allocating the 6 gigahertz spectrum going from 5.925 gigahertz all the way up to 7.1275 megahertz, using this band for 5G new radio and its evolution is a critical building block and really making it economically feasible to offer 5G services at a price point that is affordable to all income groups. Now, starting with the existing trends and anticipating the further evolution in longer terms, this webinar on this topic elaborates on the importance of making more spectrum available for IMT as an essential means to achieve the 5G vision in developed and developing markets. Really, if you look at the fact that the 6 gigahertz band spectrum, it really represents a very strong candidate band specifically for this purpose. Now, we've got an exciting group of people that are going to be telling you about this story. And basically, to start off with, we're going to be looking at the from two perspectives. We'll be starting with the regulators corner, where we'll start with Ms. Zhang Fansheng, who is the Vice Director of Frequency Planning Division, the Bureau of Radio Regulations for MIIT, who will present on the 6 gigahertz frequency band considerations in China. And this will be followed by Ms. Zhu Fei, who is the Secretary General of IMT 220 Promotional Group in China, who will discuss building a global 5G open ecosystem. We'll then be followed on by Mr. Mohammed Abdghani, who is the Radio Spectrum Procurement Director from the National Telecom Regulatory Authority of Egypt. And he'll be looking at the flexible approach for the 6 gigahertz spectrum band. And we'll be followed by Ms. Meta Pavsek-Tozvak, who is the head of the Mobile Service Agency for Communication Networks and Services of the Republic of Slovenia. And we'll be discussing finding the right balance for the future shape of the 6 gigahertz band. After we go through the regulators, we'll then move into the industry corner, where we'll start with Mr. Ross Bateson, who is the special advisor supporting the GSMA, where he will discuss the 6 gigahertz range of marketing options. Next, we'll have Ms. Päivi Ruska, representing the European Telecommunications Network Operation Association, on the 6 gigahertz IMT opportunity for Europe. We will then cover the challenge of the 6 gigahertz band in Latin America, which will be presented by Ms. Ana Valero, who is the Directory of Regulatory Affairs for Latin America from Telefonica. We will then have a view that is from Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE, presented by Ms. Erica Tujador, who is the Director of Government Industry Relations for Ericsson, But she will be looking at this and providing the vendor a statement really for all Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE. She will be looking at the role of 6 gigahertz band with 5G and its evolution in the Latin America market. We will then close out the industry section with an industry statement from Mr. Ross Bateson as well on 6 gigahertz band. At the end, we'll have a quick opportunity to open the floor to the other representative companies who are part of the 6 gigahertz webinar that didn't have a chance to speak, and we'll follow it by a Q&A. So please submit your questions into the Q&A window, and we will answer them at this time. Now what we'd like to do is start off in the regulator's corner with our first speaker. And here we have Ms. Zhang Fengsheng, who has been working in the radio spectrum regulation field since 2012. In the past 10 years, she has gained a lot of experience in space service regulation. Now her main responsibility in the Bureau of Regulation of the MIIT includes national frequency planning, coordination of WRC preparation and APT radio communication programs within the Chinese administration, and she will be discussing the 6 gigahertz frequency band considerations in China. And with that, Ms. Zhang, I will hand it over to you. Please tell me when you'd like me to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to everyone. I'm Zhang Fengsheng from MIT of China. It's my pleasure to be here to share spectrum management consideration in 6 gigahertz in China with you. Please, next slide. Thank you. Okay. This slide shows the spectrum we have assigned to 5G system now. In China, 4 mobile network operators have gotten totally 680 megahertz bandwidth to deploy 5G system. For 3.3 to 3.4 gigahertz band is limited to indoor use. We refarming 17 megahertz and 2.6 gigahertz band to meet the spectrum requirement for 5G system. Next step. Yes. This is our timeline for radio regulation. We started frequency planning preparation after WC 2007. In 2017, we released frequency planning for 5G system. 1 year later, we issued 5G frequency trial license. From our experience, it usually takes long time to prepare new frequency bands before releasing to mobile network operators. Earlier planning for further IMT spectrum development is recommended. Next slide. Thank you. Next. Next, please. Next slide, please.
No,
Okay.
Paul, I think you need to go back. Okay. I think there's a delay. So.
Okay, I will apologize. I will go back in the slide pack. Here we go.
Okay. So this slide shows the processing in 2020. As we know that a station in in above mentioned bandwidth would be affected by 5G. In order to resolve this interference, we established the procedure of frequency correlation and protection standards. Now, nearly 95% of affected Earth stations has completed the technical update or migrated to upper bands. By the end of November this year, we have 0.7 million 5G base stations deployed in our cities. More than 250 types of 5G terminals get certifications and 180 million terminals accessed into 5G base stations. People can enjoy telemedicine, remote education, 8K visual TV, intelligent transportation, online office, etc. by 5G system. Among kinds of successful applications, we found more and more convergence of ICT and 5G telecommunication technologies for industrial internet scenarios. Please next slide. Yes, so according to 5G visions and the characteristics of radio wave, we think that appropriate frequency bands for 5G should be better, including lower band, medium band, and high bands, thus to make us to meet all the requirements. Thank you. Next slide. Next, yes. But why 6 GHz is the candidate frequency band? This conclusion is based on the considering from 4 aspects. First, 6 GHz band has good propagation property and more contiguous bandwidth. Second, we can achieve the balance of capacity and coverage in this band. Also, we can meet different requirements in most scenarios. Fourth is that this band will be more easy to extend existing 5G commercial network. For the FSS in 6 GHz, it could be foreseen that more and more usage will be mitigated from lower band to upper band to obtain high throughput. Besides, FSS in this band is uplink, which we think make it easy to find the coexisting solution. Please next slide. Thank you. So this slide shows our considering for the agenda item 1.2 of WRC 2023. We are in favor of the identification of this frequency band for IMT with the appropriate technical conditions based on sharing and compatibility studies with regard to related services. So we welcome interesting countries and companies to join us in the study and the ITUR framework. This year, we have conducted the revision work of our national frequency allocation table based on the new vision of ITUR radio regulation and some domestic lists. As IMT sector members proposed to identify a 5925 to 7125 in the new revision, we are considering to accept this proposal. Meanwhile, we are considering to give spectrum license to facilitate 5G test and trial in the 59 to 7125 bandwidth band. So this is my presentation, and thank you.
Hey, Paul, you're on mute.
All right, thank you. We are going to move on to our next presenter, who we have Xu Fei, who is the Deputy Chief Engineer of the Institute of Technology and Standards, China Academy of Information and Communication Technology. She's a chairperson of Working Group 9 of the Wireless Communication Technology Committee of China Communication Standard Association and the Secretary General of IMT 220 Promotional Group. Xu Fei has an in-depth knowledge and experience of wireless and mobile communication technology and standards and will be speaking on building a global 5G open ecosystem. All right, Ms. Xu Fei, it's could unmute, that'd be great.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Xu Fei from CICT, China Academy of Information and Communication Technology. I'm very glad to be invited to this meeting. Today, my speech title is Build a Global 5G Open Ecosystem. Please next. Okay. In June of 2019, China has issued 5G license to 4 operators, as I know: China Mobile, China Telecom, China Unicom, and the new operator, China Broadcast Network. Till now, China has already assigned the sub-6 GHz bands for 5G, as Mr. Zheng has just showed to us. By October 2020, 690,000 base stations has already been deployed, and 5G users now in China has already surpassed 160 million. 181 5G smartphones had obtained certification from January to October in 2020. Please next. Then I will introduce the IMT 2020 5G Promotion Group, referred to as 5GPG for short. 5GPG was established in 2013, mainly responsible for coordinating 5G technology research and international standards cooperation in China. Another task of 5GPG is to promote the development of 5G industry and to establish 5G ecosystem. This is the 5GPG structure. The secretariat is responsible for the daily work of the 5G promotion group. At the present, there are 10 working groups under the 5G promotion group. 3PP, network, spectrum, and ITU working groups are related to international standards and spectrum research. As we all know that AI is very hot and important, so we set up a new 5G plus AI working group in 2019 to do some research in this area. For the development of 5G industry, we have set up the 5G trial, 5G barrier, and the security groups. The CV2X and application groups are aimed to explore the development of 5G and the vertical industry convergence applications, and to facilitate the scale up of industry internet, V2X, and other key industry. The main member of the 5GPG include operators such as China Mobile, China Unicom, and China Telecom, Docomo, and KDDI. The major system vendors such as Huawei, ZTE, CICT, Ericsson, NSN, and Samsung, and chip and terminal manufacturers such as Qualcomm, MTK, and research institutions and universities. Please next. Thank you. Since 2016, we carry out 5G technology research and development trial, including key technology, scheme test, and system test. The 5G trial is to mainly promote 5G key technology R&D, verify 5G scheme, supporting international standard, and accelerate the development of the 5G industry. In each step, we specify the 4 set of test specifications to guide industry R&D and to coordinate key technologies and uniform parameters. In order to support the 5G trial, we built a 5G indoor and outdoor integrated test environment. The 5G trial focused on the key functions, radio frequency and performance interfaces, IoT, and field trial for Node B and chips of 3.5 GHz and 2.6 GHz. In 2019, we carry out the minimum wave trial using 26 GHz band. With the popularization of 5G applications, especially the video services, we will drive a significant mobile traffic increase. It is considered that the 6 GHz spectrum costs lower in, please next, next. Okay. It is considered that the 6 GHz spectrum costs lower in continuous network deployment. So the 6 GHz is valued by the industry. Our group, 5G promotion group, plans to launch the research and the test of 6 GHz band in 2021. We are going to initiate the 6 GHz prototype test and the field trial on high power micro base station, including the coverage test, the capacity test, and the coexistence interference test. So we hope that the industry will work together to promote the development of the 6 GHz industry. That's all. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to move on to our next speaker. Let's move forward here. We have Mr. Mohammed Abdelghani, who holds the position of Radio Spectrum Procurement Director at the National Telecom Regulator Authority of Egypt. He is also Vice Chairman of Study Group 5 at the Radio Communications Sector of the International Telecommunications Union. Mr. Abdelghani has more than 15 years of experience in the field of spectrum management, both in the national and international levels, and is considered one of Egypt's experts in spectrum planning and engineering, radio regulations, and wireless radio communication technologies. Today, he will be speaking on moving toward a flexible approach for the 6 GHz band. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, and it is my pleasure to speak here today for this 5G 6 GHz webinar. I'm talking to you today about the need for a flexible approach when we are dealing with the 5G and 6 GHz. Next, please. Yes. When we're talking about the drivers for the 6 GHz mid-band spectrum, we need to speak about the 6 GHz is envisioned to be important by a multitude of countries globally. And these countries develop their vision for 5G 2025 and beyond. This vision for the mid-band spectrum is especially valuable for 5G use cases as it offers a higher capacity than low bands and a greater coverage than a millimetric wave bands. As you know, 5G 2025 vision, if it is developed, it would be led by the national targets to provide connectivity and promote 5G applications and use cases. In trying to fulfill these connectivity targets nationally, countries usually face requirements to meet higher capacity needs for future data demand, while also facing difficulties that a millimeter wave bands may not be available, and refarming existing bands would not be best way forward to provide enough bandwidth to meet this demand. That's where the 6 GHz could be a good solution. Talking about the connectivity targets, these targets can include, for example, broadband use cases in citywide applications such as 4K, 8K videos for a multimedia communications, and applications that need a high capacity while providing very low latency mobile networks for enterprises, campuses, and transport hubs, mall, and everything like that. Also that smart cities where innovative applications come to place with such targets such as 5G based cellular V2X, vehicular to everything, augmented reality applications, public infrastructure monitoring, smart street lights, for example, smart waste management, air quality monitoring system, and etc. In addition, the 6 GHz band can play an important role to enable several useful applications for public safety and utility applications. And you know that 3GPP standards have now new features for these communities and applications, including mission critical PTT and mission critical video applications to device, where the good capacity network can emerge. Also, one important pillar for the 5G in this area would be the Industry 4 applications. It is an emerging and it is driven by the need for innovative applications such as the artificial intelligence, analytics, virtual reality, 5G-based machine control, and vehicle-to-network applications and services, and robotic connectivity. All these applications are expected to produce efficiency and productivity for several sectors. Not to neglect, of course, the new emerging area where fixed wireless access is proposing a new targets, and 5G networks will utilize this for fixed wireless access for adequate amount of spectrum that can help evolving markets and increase possibility for providing high-speed internet services to homes and businesses. Next, please. Yes. Here we're speaking about the 6 gigahertz utilization area, where we have a representation of the radio regulations allocation table for the 6 gigahertz band in all 3 regions ahead of us here. In all 3 regions, the frequency band 5925 to 7125 megahertz has a primary allocation to mobile service and fixed satellite services. All have the same primary status. This allocation represents the need for a coexistence to be considered when dealing with these bands. When you're talking about the fixed satellite service, for example, in the 6 gigahertz satellite community is usually utilizing across different segments in the C-band. The uplink segment and corresponding downlink in the 6 gigahertz band are shown in pairs as appears in the slide ahead of you. There is an ongoing adoption for parts of the 3 to 4 gigahertz for IMT in various countries, which means that the corresponding paired bands in the 6 gigahertz may not be available for FSS and should also be available for IMT consequently. The practical fact means that there is a good room for IMT to particularly utilize parts of that 6 gigahertz band depending on the national utilization plans. Therefore, IMT and FSS uplink need to operate where IMT and FSS uplinks would need to operate. The studies should be carried out to determine the condition for which the 2 services can coexist. Talking about the fixed service in the 6 gigahertz as the other service in primary in this band, it is already utilized by fixed link in different parts of it. Amount of actual utilization could vary and may vary from country to country. Usually the 6 gigahertz is licensed to mobile operators utilizing long hop links in less dense areas. These licensed links are fixed by nature and their locations are well known. Therefore, interference with IMT can be managed on a case-by-case basis by proper network planning, where this band is allowed to be used. If it is to be used by licensed mobile operators for IMT, mobile operators can manage both access and backhaul, where this is itself opens the door for fixed mobile convergence concepts. Next slide, please. Here we're talking about the future of the band through ITUR, where we have a WRC 23 and agenda item 1.2 that calls to consider an identification for the several frequency bands, including the 6 gigahertz. For the 6 gigahertz, the call for studying the 72025 to 7125 globally, plus 6425 to 7025 for region 1. This WRC 15, we have to remember that WRC 15 have already studied the 5925 to 6425 megahertz range coexistence, and that was represented as a results for the reports S.2367 and F.2326. These two reports highlight the sharing and compatibility between the IMT and fixed and satellite services in these 2 reports. New studies would need effectively to be carried out during the upcoming WRC period to re-evaluate the IMT FSS coexistence in the 6 gigahertz band to take into account the advances of the 5G, including lower power spectral density and mitigation effects of active antenna system beamforming, and also to take counts for and utilize the new, more accurate recommendations on clutter losses, building entry losses, and propagation characteristics. Next slide, please. Swiftly speaking about the global policy direction, we all know that we have, regarding these bands, we have 3 directions up to we speak now. We have unlicensed use for the entire band, and we have licensed use for the entire band, and we have also a kind of a mixed approach. Regarding the unlicensed use, we need to highlight that countries need to assess their actual spectrum needs to verify the congestion in already granted bands for license exempt, to decide to best decide on the best way forward. Countries need to look for how to utilize the gigahertz, 5 gigahertz for Wi-Fi, plus also having consideration for the 66 to 71 gigahertz as an unlicensed band as well. Next, please. Yes. My final slide here about the conclusion that we need to make and to have consideration for that. The 6 gigahertz band is envisioned as a good IMT complement for C-band in many countries. This is a fact. National spectrum availability for license exempt in mid bands like 2.4 and 5 gigahertz plus the high band 60 gigahertz need to be assessed, and the actual need to be focused on. Regulators have to decide among license exempt and license use based on national connectivity target that they have. It is therefore important that the international regime for 6 GHz provide the enough flexibility, meaning tuning range. Also, industry in these times of studying for the agenda item 1 and 2 need to contribute effectively in the work of this agenda item to facilitate FSS IMT sharing with adequate protection for FSS in order to provide flexibility on the international level, and hence providing a harmonization approach for all countries that wish to use this band. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mohammed. Appreciate that. We're going to be moving on to our next presenter. And we have Meta Pavsek-Toskov, who is the head of Mobile Service Agency for Communication Networks and Services of the Republic of Slovenia. She was a deputy head of delegation at the World Radio Communication Conference in 2015 and 2019, and she has chaired the HCM Technology Working Group since 2010. She will be discussing the Slovene vision on finding the right balance for the future shape of the 6 gigahertz band. All right, Meta, it's hopefully unmute and carry forward.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Today I will present Slovene vision on finding the right balance for the future shape of the 6 gigahertz band. Slovenia has a WRC 19 supported under agenda item 10 to study and possibly identify the frequency band 6425 to 7125 for IMT. Next slide, please. So which bands could be option across the CPT? Could such band as 6 gigahertz be an option? Slovenia thinks that yes. In Slovenia, we have for the mid bands, we have already in use the 2.6 gigahertz band, in which one of the mobile operators, the incumbent, has already introduced the 5G. We have 4 mobile operators. They have all 3 of them have excellent LTE coverage, 98% of population and around 90% of territory. And by adding some new bands, which is planned in the multi-band auction, which is in process now and will be probably held in the beginning of 2021, we will assign the 2.3 and 3.6 gigahertz bands as well. In our country, it's not possible to use the 4.4 to 5 gigahertz band because they are not available. And the current COVID crisis showed a great importance of IMT spectrum. Mobile operators reported average traffic growth of around 40%, and in some peak hours up to 200%. There was a prolongation of voice calls from a few minutes to up to an hour, and peak hour was broadened from 2 to 6 to 8 hours, and this trend is still ongoing. Next slide, please. For the moment, this spectrum, which will be auctioned very soon, will cover the needs for a few years. So we hope that each operator will get at least 100 megahertz of contiguous spectrum, probably in the band 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz. But then in the next 5 to 7 years, we expect the growing demand, and we would need to adapt more spectrum. So this slide shows the view on coexistence with other services. We believe that with fixed service, the coordination will be easily achieved. For fixed satellite service, as my colleague before explained, there would be a need for new studies as 5G has different technological features such as active antenna systems with beam, and this would reduce the average power density. And as well, some new recommendations were developed since 2015, such as recommendation for Earth space clutter loss, Earth space propagation, and for beam linkage loss. And the status of work going on in ITU and 3GPP is that they're working on parameters and models for IMT and incumbent services. Next slide, please. So Slovenian vision for the 6 GHz band in Europe. CPT has just recently adopted the ECC decision 2001 for the lower 6 GHz band, which kind of made possible introduction of Wi-Fi in the lower 6 GHz band. The compatibility is described and will be achieved through ECC reports listed on the left. But for the upper 6 GHz band, we believe that it's similar situation as for the C band 3.4, 3.7, which is 3GPP band 78. Therefore, we believe it's beneficial to use a licensed approach and IMT usage. And here we see the candidate band for this lack of spectrum that we will in the period of 5 to 7 years. Their coordination is easier because we have known locations. For long hops, long links will be easy to achieve. And in Slovenia, we have mostly such usage. Other link usage is very rare. And as well, we have much less earth station in this upper band than in the lower band. Next slide, please. So to conclude, there is a need for more spectrum in mid-bands, enabling in a Lafinage bandwidth for higher throughputs and other use cases for mobile operators. The band will be used in the next 5 to 7 years. The lower 6 GHz band is already in process of harmonization, or in the CPT is already harmonized. For Erlang, we propose for upper 6 GHz band a license approach, as we feel that the frequency band would be used similar as in the band 3.4, 3.8. We believe that the band 3.4, 3.8 and the upper 6 GHz band are complements. The license approach in upper 6 GHz band will better protect incumbent services. Therefore, the use of IMT is a preferred solution. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Ameta. Oops, sorry, getting a little ahead here. All right, so now we're going to be moving on to the industry corner, and we are going to be starting with Mr. Ross Bateson, who is a longtime special advisor to the GSMA on government affairs across a number of issues affecting mobile broadband growth. Ross brings over 20 years experience in the communications sector, combining early work as a telecoms journalist and analyst with 15 years experience in government engagements. He will bring his view on the 6 gigahertz range market options. Ross, unmute and start off here.
Thank you, Paul, and hello to everybody. Thank you for having me here today. Today, from the GSMA, we want to explain the great prospect that the 6 gigahertz range offers to drive mobile connectivity forward in all your countries, to boost coverage and capacity, and importantly, to reduce costs. Getting 6 gigahertz right will have a major impact on 5G's future. Next slide, please. The GSMA is first and foremost an association of mobile operators, and as such, we are acutely aware of the role affordability plays in driving up the use of broadband. Back when I started working at the GSMA, we were doing campaigns for a $30 3G handset. We've run various affordability campaigns ever since during my time with the GSMA. We've recently begun a new campaign to address those in the world who are unconnected. The campaign highlights how, of the 4 billion unconnected people in the world, the vast majority are within mobile coverage. There are several reasons for this, but cost is a big one. Next slide. Citywide mid-band spectrum is being discussed at WRC 23, and this presents an opportunity to expand digital inclusion. We've discussed with you, all of you, the benefits that 5G can bring in terms of education, employment, health, and other issues. With these benefits comes a risk that people without access to these services become increasingly marginalized. This means that all of us have a responsibility to ensure that 5G is for all. The decisions made on mid-band spectrum are a big part of this. The 5G launch band is the 3.5 gigahertz range in most countries. This will see the first instances of 5G and serve the new wave of smartphones that are coming onto the market. Enhanced mobile broadband is something we all understand, and this will be one of the earliest applications for 5G, often using the 3.5 gigahertz range. The expansion of 5G is then what we have come to discuss today and how that's best served. Next slide. 6 gigahertz is being treated differently at the ITU in different regions, but for us it remains the clearest pathway for affordable 5G expansion and on a global basis. It is also the only available band for this expansion in many cases. As countries begin to maximize the use of the 3.5 gigahertz range's extent for broadband and for verticals, we need to see where the full range of 5G applications will be served. 6 gigahertz is the clearest option for broad expansion. The two bands are interlinked. Less 6 gigahertz means more 3.5 gigahertz, and we need to be frank and keep these facts on the table. We need to get mid-band right. Harmonizing mid-bands to give sufficient channel sizes can have a huge impact on broadband cost, and at the same time, we can drive forward new 5G services with better access to spectrum. Next slide. There are decisions being made all over the world on this issue, and they need to focus on market metrics. There has been a lot of talk about Wi-Fi 6E using this frequency, but a lot of unanswered questions, and I'll just name a few of them today. Firstly, we need to talk about how creating a band for unlicensed is not a reversible decision, at least not easily. Once the equipment is out there, it's there to remain. So we have to ask how much unlicensed spectrum is needed. Why is it needed? Where is it needed? We know how disruptive historical assignments can be, whether MMDS or WiMAX. Are you sure that there is a demand for Wi-Fi 6E in the band? Or are we going to look at a long tail cleanup operation in 5 to 10 years down the road? Another WiMAX. Another question, what will be powering Wi-Fi? What is the state of your core network, and who will be paying for the fiber? Who is making that investment in fiber to bring all these unlicensed systems into use? In a 5G environment, how does reaching homes with fiber relate in terms of affordability? Will wireless FWA solutions provide a better price point? And if so, what spectrum will they use? Finally, how is backhaul protected? our operators have fixed links in this band all over the world, and yet we have no studies that showing that Wi-Fi and backhaul make a good mix. Outside of fiber networks, we will need to connect homes via 5G FWA before they can even use Wi-Fi 6E. And there are no studies that show that connecting these routers won't interfere with the very networks that are trying to connect them. Licensed 5G is the path to creating high reliability, industrial grade connectivity. You can't just license Wi-Fi in the band and expect us to shrug and hope that it will be okay. Reliability for the critical and industrial applications of 5G means licensed. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of questions still to be answered. We ask that regulators look at 6 gigahertz in relation to your markets. If a fiber optic cable is literally connecting every home and every business, then for sure, some Wi-Fi spectrum is valid. If fiber is not universal, then serious questions need to be asked about how to keep gigabit broadband for all, and not just the lucky few who have the means or the money to have access to fiber. Above all, in the decisions we make, we have to make sure that connectivity stays affordable throughout the next decade and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. We are going to move on into our with Päivi Ruska, who is Vice Chairman of the European Telecommunications Network Operators Association Spectrum Working Group. She has nearly 20 years of experience in wireless communication from a position at a mobile operator, national regulatory authority, and mobile equipment provider. And while she focuses on spectrum awards and regulations at Telia, today she will be speaking on behalf of the ETNO on the 6 gigahertz opportunity for Europe. All right, Päivi.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be invited. Hello, everybody. As Paul said, today I will give view on the 6 gigahertz opportunity on behalf of ETNO, so on behalf of European operators. Next slide, please. Because we have today many participants outside Europe, here is a short introduction to what ETNO is. ETNO Association brings up operators' view to European telecommunication policy and regulatory work. It has 32 members, which are network operators operating in Europe, and 8 observers, including vendors and also operators outside Europe. Members investments in Europe cover about 70% of fixed network investments and over 60% of mobile network investments. ETNO members contribute nearly 140 billion euros to society in European Union, for example, as salaries, taxes, and interests. Next slide, please. Then to the 6 gigahertz. The current status in Europe is that the lower part of 6 gigahertz band is being harmonized for wireless access systems and radio LANs on unlicensed basis, as Meta already introduced. The allowed devices are low power indoor devices and very low power devices that can be used also for outdoors. Harmonized use for unlicensed equipment in European Union means that anyone can buy and use the equipment without separate permission in all European Union countries and also some other countries. The low power device category is limited to indoor only use to avoid potential interference to existing use, for example, for fixed links. Of course, it is difficult to guarantee that the equipment is used only indoors because the use is unlicensed and the users are unknown. Regarding the upper 6 gigahertz band, it is currently being studied for IMT for WRC 23 in region 1, which covers also Europe. ETNO supports IMT studies and use for the upper upper 6 GHz band in Europe. This would be a balanced approach, considering that the lower 6 GHz band is being reserved for unlicensed RLAN in Europe. And of course, for us, the wider and global harmonization is also important for economies of scale, as Ross just brought up in the TSMA presentation. The main use in the 6 GHz band today is fixed and fixed satellite service that has also been brought up by earlier speakers. And I just want to bring up that operators are actually a user of the band with the fixed links today, and 6 GHz band is an important band for backhaul service in many countries. in many countries, also a bit more rural areas, as it enables longer haul links. Next slide, please. European operators consider that new mid-band IMT spectrum is needed in mid to long term in Europe. Demand is foreseen, especially in urban areas. Mid-band spectrum can provide high capacity, but also coverage, for example, outdoor to indoor propagation. And this is not something that millimeter wave spectrum can provide. Even though millimeter wave spectrum is relevant for very high capacity services and for example at hotspots and for fixed wireless access case. The demand is driven by existing use, but also by new use cases that 5G is expected to enable. As you know, the mobile data use has been increasing all the time. When considering the existing use cases, for example, media consumption, people may not use so much more time with the media services, but the demand increases to higher resolution that 5G and also the new equipment would enable. In addition to existing use, there is expected to be a lot of new use cases that have been named also by earlier speakers today. And typically, the introduction of new technology boosts the data consumption because it enables new things. And this has been seen also with 4G and 3G introduction. We believe that the upper 6 GHz band offers an excellent opportunity to meet the demand in Europe. We also believe that a licensed approach enables protection of existing use where the protection is needed. This is because the licensed approach enables setting limitation in the license. The licensed users are also known, which enables to ensure that they meet the license conditions. Because of this, we believe that the licensed approach would also allow higher transmission powers compared to what is allowed for RLAN in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Päivi. We are going to move on to our next speaker, where we have Anna Valero, who is a member of Telefónica's Global Regulation and Public Policy team, and as Director of Regulatory Affairs for Latin America and Telefónica. Anna defines and coordinates the positioning of the Telefónica Group in relation to regulatory issues in Telefónica's 14 countries of operation in Latin America. With over 25 years of experience in the telecommunication industry, she has held management positions in pricing, marketing, customer experience, wholesale, and regulation in different countries in Europe and Latin America. Today, Anna will be discussing the challenge of the 6 gigahertz band in Latin America. And Anna, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you for the invitation to this event today for Telefónica. Please, next slide. First of all, I would like to make a short introduction about Telefónica. Telefónica is one of the leading telecommunications operators in Europe and Latin America. At the moment, we have 14 operations, 3 in Europe, in Spain, Germany, and the UK, and 11 in Latin America, 5 of them that provide fixed and mobile services, and 6 of them that only provide mobile services. We operate one of the largest fiber optic networks in Europe and Latin America. And at the moment, we have around 340 million accesses, nearly 200 million of them in Latin America. Next slide, please. At the moment, the 6 GHz band is being discussed in many different countries in Latin America. At the moment, only Chile has recently assigned the whole band to non-licensed used. And at the moment, we have public consultations in many of the most important countries in the region: Colombia, Peru, Mexico, Brazil, and last week, just after I prepared this presentation, Argentina issued a consultation on the lower part of this band also. So at the moment, the discussions on the use of this band, on the allocation of this band, are just in the center of the agenda in Latin America. Next slide, please. And we think, and the position of Telefónica and of many of the operators in the region, is that this band will be key in the future development of 5G in the region, due to two reasons that have to do with how Latin America is at the moment. The first one has to do with the demographics. 81%, more than 81% of the people in the region live in urban areas. That implies that there is high concentration of people in cities, and there is a need of spectrum in the middle bands to face an increasing demand of mobile services in these urban areas where most population live. So having spectrum available in mid bands is key to face the increasing demand in this of connectivity in these areas. But in addition, the second aspect has to do with the broadband infrastructure in the region. As you can see in this chapter, the penetration of fixed broadband services in Latin America is very low. It's around 10.5% of the people in Latin America have fixed broadband at home. So for us, that implies two different aspects. The first one has to do that there is a huge opportunity of using 5G, some of the use cases of 5G services for increasing broadband penetration in the region through enhanced mobile broadband and fixed wireless access services. That will be a huge opportunity in the region. And on the other hand, it also gives us a clear idea of which are the needs for additional spectrum for Wi-Fi services. It's not only that we have very low penetration of fixed broadband services in Latin America, but also that the speed of these broadband services is quite low. So the problem with the quality of the Wi-Fi services doesn't have to do with needing additional spectrum for these services, but with the networks that are supporting the Wi-Fi services. The next slide, please. So due to these factors, we think that a full allocation of this band to unlicensed services, as Chile has done recently, wouldn't be very efficient for the regions. We and most of the operators in the regions advocate for a balanced solution, allocating the lower part of the band to unlicensed services and the higher part of the band to IMT. We think that this decision, this balanced distribution of the band, will benefit both customers and service providers, and in terms of fostering investment, competition, and better services for customers. As we said, having more spectrum available in the region in the mid bands will be critical in the future for the development of 5G services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. We are going to move on now to Erica. Let me bring up your bio. All right. So Erica Tejedor is the Director of Government and Industry Relations with Ericsson. And while she is with Ericsson, she's actually going to be speaking on behalf of all of the vendors involved with promoting the 6 gigahertz band. So Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE. And here she will be talking about exploiting 5G and its evolution in the Latin America market and the key role of the 6 gigahertz band. So, Erica, you want to go?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me properly. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm also very happy to speak not only as Ericsson, but as Paul mentioned, on behalf of Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE. Next slide, please. We want to start this presentation by talking a little bit about the ecosystem on the 6 gigahertz. And we see it from 3 different perspectives where work is ongoing. We see work ongoing in the ITU. We see work is ongoing also in 3GPP. And at the same time, the industry is also doing some work to create the ecosystem. So looking at the ITU, it has already been mentioned that there is work ongoing in relation to Agenda Item 1.2, considering identification of the 6 gigahertz. Right now, there is work in relation with the IMT parameters, well, not only IMT, but also the incumbent parameters. After this, in June 2021, there is a cutoff for the parameters for sharing studies. And then we will start conducting all the sharing and compatibility studies going towards creating CPM text and all the way to WRC that will happen in 2023. In parallel with this, 3GPP is also doing a lot of work in relation with 6 gigahertz. Right now, they are working on the IMT parameters with Working Party 5D. But not only that, there is also a work item that has been started in Run 4, and it's about the introduction of 6 gigahertz NR in license bands. So this is really a clear message from 3GPP on the interest from the industry to develop an ecosystem, 5G NR ecosystem for the 6 gigahertz. As it was already mentioned by AICT, there is also planned for IMT 2020 trials, and that will start in 2021. So this is definitely the correct path to have an ecosystem for the 6 gigahertz working towards the WRC. Next slide, please. When we look at the 6 gigahertz, and it has been mentioned earlier that the 6 gigahertz is part of the mid-band. Of course, we need the spectrum in the low, in the mid, and in the high bands, and we have to be careful that we don't mix them up because they are designed for different use cases. So when we look at the 6 gigahertz, we have done some analysis to compare it with the 3.5 gigahertz, just to understand, are these bands similar? Are they close enough to call both of the mid-band spectrum? As you can see in the graph on the right side, we have done some simulations looking at the measurements on the UE of CSI RSRP. And you can see the 2 graphs very, very close to each other, which means that both of them can have similar characteristics. Of course, the 6 gigahertz is higher than the 3.5 gigahertz, and that means that the propagation will be worse, but this can be compensated thanks to the 5G NR technology. And thus, we believe that 5G NR provides similar coverage both in the 6 gigahertz and in the 3.5 gigahertz. This is one of the reasons why we see that the 6 gigahertz will be a very good complement in the future to the 3.438 gigahertz, since this will not be sufficient in the long term. Next slide, please. An issue that we always have to look at when we look at new usage of a spectrum is coexistence with incumbents. And several of the previous speakers already introduced which ones are the incumbents in the 6 gigahertz band. We have 2 incumbents, which are fixed service and fixed satellite service. And we see the coexistence in different ways. Coexistence with fixed service. Fixed service is a service that it's mainly being driven by operators, as for example, Telefonica mentioned, and also Ethno. The typical applications are rural areas, and they are long hops, and they are also at known locations, and they have known characteristics. These are the reasons why we really believe that coordination is possible. Coordination with IMT could be on a case-by-case basis, and the coordination will also depend on how the 5G NR base stations are located in relation with the fixed links. So if they look at each other, if the antennas are looking at each other, then the separation will be slightly larger than if the 5G NR base station is off the main beam from the fixed link. Nevertheless, we believe that the coordination is possible, and it will depend on different parameters. In some cases where coordination is perhaps not the best option, there is also an option of migration of fixed links to other frequency bands. But again, this will be up to the regulator and also to the MNOs that are running the fixed links. Next slide, please. When looking at coexistence with satellite, I think it's really important to remember that the 6 gigahertz is actually paired with the C-band, so with the 3438 or 3438, 3842, and the 4.5 to 4.8 gigahertz. These are all bands that are already today, they have really large 3GPP ecosystem. And that means that many countries around the world have already allocated these bands for IMT or 5G NR. That makes us think that if we are thinking that the downlink of the C-band will be decreasing, that means that the uplink of the C-band, which is the 6 gigahertz, is expected also to be decreasing in the future. Also, when we look at the FSS, and considering that this is really a global system, we believe that the ITU is of extreme importance when we look at coexistence. And that's why we believe that it's really good that we are looking at the 6 gigahertz at WRC 23, because that would allow to put any kind of decision that we will make will ensure that FSS uplink is protected on a global basis. At the moment, as I mentioned earlier, there are IMT parameters that are being developed, and also there is work ongoing on propagation models. And as it was already mentioned by several of the previous speakers, coexistence will need to be considered in the studies. And we believe that thanks to the advanced characteristics of 5G NR, when we compare with IMT advanced, this will really facilitate coexistence with FSS uplink, and in particular the active antenna systems with beamforming. We believe that this will make a key difference. Next slide, please. Another issue that was brought up which is very important for the region, is this spectrum really needed for RLAN in Latin America? As Telefonica mentioned, the average penetration of fixed broadband in Latin America is quite low. It's actually 10.53%. That's extremely low. That tells us that the bottleneck is in the fixed broadband access. It's actually not in the RLAN spectrum availability. And in fact, if we look at the fixed broadband average speed in Latin America, that is 31.47 megabits per second, while the actual technologies, if we look, for example, at Wi-Fi 5, it's up to 6.9 gigabit per second. So we can see that the average speed is already much lower than what the standards allow today. So the question is, will additional spectrum for RLAN improve the speed at home. We believe that in Latin America, the usage of 6 GHz for license will be more beneficial for all end users, and it will be key for citywide high capacity as well as fixed wireless access. Next slide, please. An additional issue to consider also when talking about Ireland is the fact that, as mentioned earlier, there are countries that are going for all the 6 GHz license, but there are countries that are going for all the 6 GHz unlicensed. Now, when we look at the unlicensed equipment that is becoming available today, of course, the policy decisions, first of all, as it was indicated by GSMA, are decisions that are irreversible, or at least will be very difficult to change. There is a fact that even though the Ireland equipment should not be working when in those countries where regulators decide on the spectrum to be used for license, it's really difficult for regulators to actually control that this is happening. So the movement of unlicensed equipment is basically really difficult to control by regulators. Say this, countries that will decide for licensed spectrum should of course not suffer interference from unlicensed devices, which are developed for countries that will or have decided for unlicensed usage. So how do we solve this problem? We think that there is a solution that is required to control the equipment circulation across different countries, so that we ensure that the Ireland devices can work on the places that they have been designed for, but we need to make sure also that those countries decided on licensed equipment or licensed usage are also being protected. A recommendation from our side is also to consider carefully any decision that may be affected by later decisions at WRC 23. Next slide, please. The last slide that we have is really our recommendation for the 6 GHz. We see the upper part of the band that is going to be considered or is being considered towards WRC 23. We see this as a great opportunity to ensure spectrum harmonization for IMT. We see harmonization globally, even though part of the band is only for region 1. We have also to remember that at WRC 23, additional countries may also decide to include their names on the footnotes in the radio regulations. That will, of course, help to build a global ecosystem. For the lower part of the band, though, we believe that consideration on a country-by-country basis is needed. And with that, I will thank you all for listening.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Really appreciate that. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move to back to Ross. And so basically, we as a consortium of regulators and industry people we're looking together the 6 GHz band. There is an industry statement that's been put together for the International Mobile Telecommunications Industry statement that we have here, and we're going to have Ross go through it for us. So Ross, here it is, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Paul, and it's an honor to wrap up this part of our session today with reading out the industry statement on the 6 GHz band. We believe that the international mobile telecommunication system is the efficient way to provide broadband wireless connectivity on a worldwide scale and greatly contribute to global economic growth and social development. IMT technology development and deployment continue contributing to creating a large number of new jobs and GDP growth. 5G is a pillar of digital transformation, enhancing mobile broadband and enabling new use cases. 5G connectivity is essential for the development of new information technologies such as IoT, cloud computing, big data, artificial intelligence, and many more. The user mobile data consumption rate is increasing and will keep growing rapidly, and not only by human users. More spectrum is needed for 5G to meet future network capacity and coverage demand for citywide use cases. In particular, the 6 GHz frequency band is a strong candidate to offer seamless, high-capacity, citywide coverage with unlicensed spectrum. The WRC-23 preparatory process has started in the ITUR in relation to the possible IMT identification of the 6 GHz band, and the standardization work in 3GPP is on its way. We therefore recommend policymakers and stakeholders should carefully assess the opportunity of IMT identification at WRC-23 within the 6 GHz band, which will be important to establish the large-scale ecosystem for this frequency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to get into the Q&A, but before we get into the actual questions that have been submitted online, I'm going to go to them real quick. What I'd like to do is, we've had some great industry speakers, regulatory people speaking, but the consortium of people is actually much larger that we have on this call. So what I'd like to do is kind of open the floor to our other reps who are on this webinar, if anybody would like to add any additional comments or thoughts on the 6 GHz topic. And while that's going on, I am going to get the Q&A ready. All right, go ahead.
Chair, may I provide a view from Finland?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Just trying to get the camera working. Okay. So.
All right, Tom.
All right. My name is Tom Wikström, and I'm a senior advisor at the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency. I am also the national coordinator for the WRC 23 agenda item 1.2. And I would like to thank you, first of all, for this event and the speakers and presenters for the interesting slides. Of the frequency bands covered by agenda item 1.2, this 6425 to 7125 frequency band is the only one that really concerns us. And currently, the entire band is extensively used here in Finland by fixed links. However, we feel that sharing and compatibility studies under this agenda item are important, since the intention is to help administrations to plan for the future, which, as we know, is very difficult to predict. So even if IMT use within the band today may seem unlikely, considering the current use we have, we feel that it may be a potential option for the future, and that studies in ITUR could help us to better understand coexistence possibilities between fixed links and IMT 2020. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, yeah.
Hey, Paul, you're on mute.
Thank you, Prakash, for reminding me. So, Stefan, I see you've come on. Would you like to share some thoughts?
Yes, so Kaliago produced the report on 6 GHz, which was published earlier this year. And we just concluded also a study in Colombia. For Colombia, the interesting situation there is that out of the 51 million of the Colombian population, 20 million live in areas with a population density larger than 13,900 people per square kilometer. So this is where you get an enormous traffic density, and this is where you really, really need that additional spectrum, or you would have an enormous number of small cells. And this really does illustrate the value of an IMT identification of the upper 700 megahertz of the band for Latin American countries, because there are many cities in Latin America with a population density of greater than 9,000, where the spectrum would be desperately needed.
Great, Stefan. You bring up some fantastic points. I appreciate that. Any other comments from anybody, or shall we head into the Q&A? All right, let's go into the question and answer period then. Basically, based on what Stefan said, and really kind of like the need, I think, in this being focused on Latin and South America, I actually want to direct the first question to Anna. And Anna, the question that we got in, maybe kind of revisit what you said, is why do you see 6 gigahertz as an important band for IMT in the Latin/South America region? So Anna?
Hi, thank you, Paul. And thank you for these questions. As Stefan has just pointed out, one of the challenges that we have in Latin America is we have a very high concentration of people in big cities. And that will imply that we will need to have network with a lot of capacity to face the increased demand of traffic in these areas. We think that mid-bands will be key in an efficient network deployment, and as Ross mentioned before, to make services available and with low prices for customers. I think Latin America is more relevant even than in other regions like Europe. In addition, we also have this challenge that Erika also mentioned in relation to the capabilities of the fixed broadband services in Latin America. We have very few people with access to fixed broadband services, and also the average speed of these services is very low. So the challenge for improving Wi-Fi services doesn't have to do with having additional spectrum for these unlicensed services, but with improving the services, fixed and mobile, that you use to connect the Wi-Fi services. So I think that the importance of the 6 gigahertz spectrum band in Latin America is even higher than in other areas, in other regions. So at this moment, as I mentioned, in most countries, the regulators are reviewing this issue. It wasn't a key element in their agendas up to a couple of months ago. And I think it's very important to make them aware of the situation that we face in Latin America and the impact that in the midterm may have to make a decision on this band that doesn't balance the pros and cons of assigning to unlicensed services. As I mentioned, we think that this balanced approach between unlicensed services and IMT will be a reasonable balance, and we expect that most of the regulators will back this position. As I mentioned, Telefónica, we are fixed and mobile operator, and we think that the challenge at this moment is to make sure that we assign the spectrum to the services that will provide better services and more welfare to the societies in Latin America. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I guess following on that, we had a similar question basically in Europe. And Päivi, I'm going to address this question to you since a part of the ETNO and speaking for them today. So when do you expect the need for 6 gigahertz to materialize in Europe, and what are the main drivers?
Thank you, Paul. This is a good question. Maybe not so easy to answer as the demands vary by countries as well as by operators. When considering the mobile demand, it depends very much on the population density, as has been brought up by Colleago, and also there is big variation in average mobile data per user in different countries and also for different operators. And this depends on the availability of fixed networks in different areas, and as well as pricing of the different network services. And of course, there is variation in the current spectrum holdings in European countries. I have to note that all European countries have not awarded the spectrum even in 3.6 gigahertz band, which is the key initial band for 5G in Europe. Also, some countries have set aside part of that band for non-operator use, and this may make the operator demand for new mid-band spectrum more urgent in some countries. And of course, as Finland, or Tom from Finland brought up, then there is different demands for the existing services in different countries. Like in Finland, there is a lot of fixed links currently. In my presentation, I indicated kind of ethno demand from mid to long term, which I would say is within 5 to 10 years. And when considering what is needed from the regulatory standardization and licensing processes, 5 years is actually quite short time to make new spectrum available for the actual deployment. I don't know if that was
that's great.
Sufficient.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. You brought up an excellent point, bringing about fixed service and fixed satellite service, and we had a couple of questions coming in specific about fixed satellite service. So, Meta, I'm going to address this to you because I believe you touched on this on your presentation. So I'll start with you, and I'd like other ones to chime in as well. But could you elaborate on the sharing opportunities with incumbent services like fixed service and fixed satellite service in the band?
Yes, Slovenia has in this upper 6 gigahertz band long-haul fixed services for backhauling, typically connecting broadcasting transmitters located on high mountains. Such point-to-point links in populated area are very rare, usually just connection from such transmitter to the studio, or rarely it happens some connection, short range connections. So for this high fixed service put on the mountain on high tower, we see absolutely no problem to coordinate, as we believe that IMT will be mostly used in urban areas, in cities, or if it's used in rural, it will be in populated areas and definitely not on the top of the hills. So with this, we see no problem. But for these few links, we can kind of inform operators, and they should avoid operating in the vicinity of these links. And for fixed satellite service, we don't have so many. As I think Erika explained, this is the same band as it's kind of co-located with the C-band, the primary 5G band. But for these few earth stations, we can have exclusion zone. In Slovenia, we have case of one earth station in remote area where there is actually no population, and it is not many base stations around, so this would not be an issue. But there are some small earth stations on rooftops in adjacent band, and for this, I think it could be easily avoided by defining small exclusion zone. And as well, we are in situation that for geostationary satellites, we have large elevation angles, so we believe it will not be an issue. Thank you.
Okay. I guess open it up. I think this is a big consideration around the world. Does anybody like to add anything around fixed service or fixed satellite and its association with the 6 gigahertz band? So Meta, you did such a fantastic job. Excellent. All right, great. So along with that too, there's some concerns about fixed service and fixed satellite. There's also the discussion around Wi-Fi. So why can't 5G simply share unlicensed 6 gigahertz spectrum with Wi-Fi? Is there someone willing to step up and answer that question?
I can answer to that question.
Excellent, thank you.
So I think usually we like to have technology neutrality, but you always need to think it's not only about technology, it's also about the nature of the different technologies. So if we look at IMT or 5GNR, how we have designed the technology is really assuming that the channel will be also accessible for the operator. This is, of course, one of also the main pillars for investment for the operators. If we compare this with the RLAN technologies, and that's not only Wi-Fi, but it's also LAA, which is a 3GPP technology, and it's also NRU. These technologies are actually designed on a best effort basis, which means that they are designed in a way in which we don't assume that the channel will be available. We will always check, is the channel available or not? And if the channel is available, then we can use it. But again, this is best effort. While for 5GNR, it's really a technology to guarantee quality of service. And if you want to guarantee quality of service, that means that you need to have the channel available all the time. So that's really the reason why these two different RLAN versus IMT cannot really use the same channels.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. I guess Eric, I'm going to follow up with you on this one right here. Is we're focusing on 6 gigahertz. There's other mid bands that are going to become available in the next decade or so, around 3,800 to 4,200 or 44 to 5. I'm sorry, 38. Yeah, 100, 4,200, 4,400 to 5,000 megahertz in that space. So why the focus on 6 gigahertz and not these other spectrum bands?
It all depends on the timeline that we are looking at. So if you look at today what is being made available across the world is the C-band, the 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz. In some other parts of the band where this is difficult to get access to, there are other alternatives. For example, the 4.5 to 5 gigahertz. But when we look at the 6 gigahertz, is really a mid-band that we look for the future towards 2025 and beyond. So that's why the WRC agenda item for 2023 is a really good timing for this band. Of course, there are other candidate bands like 3.8 for 2 gigahertz, but we have to consider that there are not so many more additional mid-band spectrum, and that's why the 6 gigahertz really becomes critical. It's very difficult to find mid-band spectrum that has the same characteristics as 3.5 gigahertz. And also that it's available in the sense of that you have really large chunks of spectrum, which is contiguous, which is what MNOs at the end need.
Paul, this is Dao Tian from ZTE. Can I also chip in here a little bit?
Absolutely. I'd love to have you chip in. That'd be fantastic.
Thank you. And let me just switch on my camera so that everyone knows who I am, what I look like. Hi. This is Dao Tian from ZTE, and I'm located in China. And there's a humidifier next to me. So, right. So, in China, I believe China is one of the few countries that has the C-band in place for mobile for IMT technology. We have the 3.4 to 3.6 that's assigned for China Unicom and China Telecom, and we also have the 3.3 to 3.4 for indoor use for the China Telecom and China Unicom as well. And meanwhile, we do see there's a great need for future usage of IMT technology, not only in the mobile world, but also in other use cases and scenarios as defined in 3GPP and some other industry alliances as well, that there's a huge need for more frequency bands to be allocated for IMT use as well. And so that would be my 2 cents for this topic, this question. Thank you, Paul.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so okay, next one, Mohammed, you're the vice chair of, I think, study group 5. So I think this question will work really good for you. Is what do you see as the main challenges for 6 gigahertz for the WRC conference in 2023? How are you going to address them?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that. Yes, this is indeed a good question. Frankly speaking, from my point of view, that one of the major challenges for the agenda item 1 to 2 regarding the 6 gigahertz band, that the band itself is segmented somehow between region 1 and the rest of the world. The rest of the world is only considering 100 megahertz, but region 1 is considering 600, and this is kind of segmentation that may, and I believe it will somehow pose some difficulties when trying to make some decisions or collaborations about the way forward to have a consultation on the way forward for this band. You know that Working Party 5D is the working party responsible for conducting the sharing and studies and CPM texts for this agenda item. Still, Working Party 5D is in the early stages of having this kind of preparation. Is still in part of progressing the working plans and having some sort of a skeleton for the CPM text. While this is in early stages, we see some interest that gives a clear sign that there should be a good way forward for all interested parties from different parts of the world to have their views reflected in a way. But the segmentations may be some kind of a brick wall that not all of us or all of the interested parties could present their views or their interest freely. This is one of the issues that already have been agreed back at WRC 19, if you remember. But the other interesting issue that I also believe that it could be a way positive or negative, that the band itself is not handled separately in an agenda item. You have other bands for agenda item 1 to 2, like the 3 gigahertz and the 10 gigahertz as well. This itself poses some pressure on the time schedule and a way we prepare for all these different bands when we are addressing compatibility and sharing studies. This is a big challenge for Working Party 5D and all the interested parties in this Working Party, how to work together to have a comprehensive and a good sharing and compatibility studies that would leverage the need for this band for IMT, considering the segmentation and fragmentation of the agenda item among other bands as well. This is my point of view in this area, and I believe, I hope that it would help you and everyone in this session to understand that the situation we have regarding this agenda item. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we have 2 more questions here I want to get to. So the first one, I'm sorry, did anybody want to add anything to that? I apologize.
Yes, I would like to add something. Erica. I think Mohammed brought a really good point to the discussion in relation to that WRC, the agenda item 1.2 for 6 gigahertz. Large part of the band is focused on region 1, and that's correct. But I think we also have to remember that if you look at the table of allocation in the radio regulations, it's actually the same services across the world. So region 1, region 2, and region 3, they all have mobile, fixed service, and fixed service satellite uplink. So from that perspective, I think that even if the agenda item is focused on region 1, all different regions are, can benefit really from the studies, because in reality, it's the same services all across the world. And I think it's also important that even if it's for region 1, that of course, all different countries are always invited to take part of WRC. And it's very important to have the view from all regulators across the world.
Thank you, Erica.
Yes, if I add, Paul.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yes, that is very good idea. I think this is a very good addition from Erica, that this indeed the band is allocated to mobile service, and there is a way somehow for all interested parties to get utilizing this band, upon even if the identification itself is limited to certain portion of it for certain areas. Yes, this could be a way forward, and I invite everyone to look at this view in their considerations for the work of agenda item 1.2. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else wants to add? All right. So like I mentioned, I'm going to focus on two more questions here. The first one's a practical one. So I'd like someone from Ericsson, Huawei, or Nokia or ZTE to answer. And it's basically looking at, increasing the number of spectrum and having the number of, base stations and radios that are out there. And, as we get into these new frequency spectrums, are these dedicated to 5G only, or do these base stations support previous IMT versions or add on, other frequency bands as well? One of the vendors, or does someone want to step up and answer that?
Hello, Paul.
Yes.
Hi, it's Alessandro from Huawei. Can you...
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. So, yes, thank you for asking this question. Alessandro from Huawei. I'm based in Italy. And of course, our base stations are always, I would say, generation neutral. So we have, in Huawei, we call it single round type of approach. So this is something that enables, in general, smoothest migration from one generation to another one. But there is one thing which I would like to highlight, which is the importance of contiguous large bandwidth available for radios. So especially when we go into massive MIMO base stations, and so more complex technology, I think that it's really, really important for the TCO, total cost of ownership, to allow operators to implement new bands with sufficiently wide number of megahertz, because this is going to allow the same base station to address a larger number of users. So we heard from, for example, Coleago was mentioning, Stefan from Coleago was mentioning that there is a lot of population, for example, in Latin America, which is living in areas with something like 13,000 people per square kilometer or more. Then, well, in those cases, it is much more effective to be able to deploy one single radio, for example, in the 6 GHz band, which is able to cover large bandwidth, because this is really going to improve the business case for the investment, and it's going to incentivize the investment.
Great. Thank you, Alessandro. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, Paul Prakash here. Let me just put my camera on. Can you see me? Perfect.
Yes, Prakash, we're good.
Great. Yeah, just speaking on behalf of Nokia. So yeah, obviously, the base stations, just like the devices, can support multiple bands. One thing to point out though is that each band has their unique regulatory requirements. So that needs to be taken into account as you build these different, with different base station with different bands. So, regulation for 6 gig will be different from 3.5 or other bands. So all of this need to be considered as we put together this base station. So it's not as if you can just reuse whatever you've done for 3.5 or other base station, other bands, and just reuse exactly the same, specs for 6 gig. We have different incumbents, like we've heard today, that we need to consider also. So a lot of work needs to happen to have a regulatory framework in place, and then after that, the 3GPP can then define a band based on those regulatory requirements as we've heard today. Okay, thanks.
All right. So I got one more question here. It's kind of a big question. Ross, I'm going to direct it towards you because I think it's kind of a good kind of bringing it all together kind of question that you'd be able to respond to. And it's, how significant is 6 gigahertz for 5G and its future evolution? And what are your members saying that you interact with through the GSMA?
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, so what are our members saying? Well, we surveyed our members, and there was a mention of this in my slides today. Obviously, as far as WRC is concerned, this is different chunks of 6 gigahertz are being considered in different areas. We look at this very much as a global band. As Erica just said, we're going to be doing the studies, this WRC that will that will give clarity on the coexistence with other services that will be applicable throughout the world. When we surveyed our members, it was in terms of the priority of bands, this came out priority for mobile network operators, with 90% of them responding that this was highest priority. So I think that gives you some kind of answer of the enthusiasm of the mobile network sector. In terms of its importance, we'll see. I think that the Chinese decisions that that were discussed today by our first two speakers show you the amount of scale that we might see in this band even before WRC 23 comes across, and that kind of scale is critical for driving down handset chipset costs. We believe that it represents the best possible chance for a global band in terms of expansion, a global band in terms of 5G expansion. And it allows us to create these wide channels that I didn't go into today, because I think we've told most people about the relationship between channel size and affordability, but I know some people touched on as well, and Alessandro was just mentioning this again. So to give us that wide channel expansion, it's a crucial band. It may be different in different areas, and my presentation we very much focused on the idea of market metrics defining this. There's certainly some countries where the upper part of the band won't be sufficient, where this is used heavily for fixed wireless access. We expect more than the top part of the band above 6425 to be necessary, especially in areas with dense urban areas, with countries that have big megacities, but that's a lot of the world. So we see it as crucial, and we see it as a very strong option with a strong ecosystem in a lot of the world. In other parts of the world that maybe find the idea of expanding 3.5 gigahertz harder, we find it as the only option. So I would say it's between important and indispensable. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ross. All right, so that will conclude our Q&A section. Just a couple things as we close out this webinar. For more information, as I mentioned, this is a webinar series. This is the second. We did have our first webinar, which was back on the 8th of September. And there's also the resolution 245 from the Radio Consortium in 2019 that we have on the link here that has some information on the identification of the frequency bands. This webinar itself can be replayed basically through the same registration process we went through here. When this is done, we'll encapsulate it and be made available for on-demand viewing. And then coming up next, there's a couple other webinars that we're looking at bringing together around 6 gigahertz. These are still to be determined exactly when they are. But these are rough timeframes we're looking at. Having the next webinar, which is going to focus on Europe and the RCC, on most likely Monday, the 18th of January, we'll see a webinar. The next one will be on the Middle East and Africa. And finally, webinar 5 will be on APAC around MWC Shanghai timeframe. And with that, we want to thank everyone for joining. I like basically this view of kind of like showing really who everyone is here. So for myself, for all the regulators, for the industry leaders that presented on this call, as well as the subset of supporters who came in and stepped up that you can see on the slide that are promoting the use of the 6 gigahertz band. I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar and have a great day. Thank you very much.